Can you guys see all these little like dust particles floating around me? It's so distracting. Gosh. Oh my gosh, go away. Oh gosh. Welcome back to my channel. I know the background's a little bit different. I thought I would just kind of change it up for you guys. So this video is the last video in my 3-part mini series on classroom hacks, and this video is going to focus on instructional hacks that you can use to increase student engagement and participation during your lessons. If you haven't already seen the first 2 videos in this mini series, I highly suggest you check them out. The first video focused on 10 classroom management hacks, and the second video focused on 10 organizational hacks for your classroom. If you haven't already seen them, I will have the links down in the description box of this video, and the links will also be at the end of this video. So for these instructional hacks, I wanted to give you ideas that were easy to use and didn't require a lot of prep time or technology. So I'm gonna give you guys 10 ideas that you can use for any grade level, and they're so easy to implement, you could start using them next week. Now, most of these hacks are gonna focus on student engagement because that's a big part of who I am as a teacher. I'm a strong believer that student engagement is what drives student success. Especially teaching at a Title I school, a lot of my students are dealing with so many problems outside of the classroom that they are not excited to learn when they come to school. So that's one of my biggest motivators as a teacher. I want to make sure that all of my students are excited to be there and they have a love of learning. So for each hack, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the benefits or why it is important, and then give you a couple of ideas of how to use it in your classroom. Hack number 1, callbacks and hand motions. So a callback is also called a call and response. It's basically a way to get student attention where the teacher will say a word or phrase and then the students will repeat something back to them. Callbacks are definitely something you have to practice a lot with your students, especially in the primary grades, and you want to make sure you have high expectations so your students know that they have to participate every single time. I personally like to introduce a new callback about once every quarter during the school year because I have found that using the same callback for the entire school year can get very stale and boring. The first callback I always like to teach to my students is class yes. Now that does come from whole brain teaching. If you are not already familiar with whole brain teaching, I definitely recommend you check it out. I will have the link to the website down in the description box. One of the reasons I really love this callback is because there are so many different ways you can do it and so many variations. So some of the ways that I will do it is I'll say class class and they'll say yes yes, or classy class and they'll respond with yes yes. You also can do it in funny voices or even whisper it just to kind of keep it interesting. Even though I introduced class yes in the first quarter, I definitely use it for the entire school year. It's always just kind of my go-to because it is what I use during my internship and it's what I've used every year of teaching. So for me, it's usually the first thing that comes to mind. However, I will introduce new callbacks in the second, third, and fourth quarters because I do want to keep things interesting. I'll go ahead and share some of my favorite callbacks with you guys. You have probably heard me use these in my vlogs. I really love using shark bait and then the students respond with ooh aha, and that's from the movie Finding Nemo. I also like to use to infinity and then the students respond with and beyond, and that comes from Toy Story. I also like to use are you ready kids, and then they respond with aye aye captain. That of course is from SpongeBob. And then I also like to use Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you, is what the students respond with, and that obviously comes from Scooby-Doo. Another callback I like to use is waterfall. I really like to use this if the noise volume is just getting a little bit too high during independent work or small group. Basically, I say waterfall and then the class will respond with shh, and they kind of bring their hands down in like a waterfall motion. And what I really love about this is that my students will hold each other accountable as well. So if they see that the class is getting too loud, one of them will call out waterfall and they'll go ahead and do it. And it's just really, really good for keeping the noise volume down. I also mentioned hand motion. So I am a really big supporter of using sign language in the classroom, or ASL, American Sign Language. I think the reason is that my teacher in second grade used a lot of sign language with us, and it has just been one of those things that has stuck with me. So one thing I will do, if some of my students are talking, but most of them are paying attention, if I don't want to use a callback, I will just make eye contact with those students who are paying attention, and I'll sign to them thank you, and they'll usually sign back you're welcome. And I just keep doing that until the rest of the students have caught on, and eventually I'll make eye contact with all of them, thank them, and then move on with the lesson. I also really like to use sign language for multiple choice or like true false questions. So for true false questions, or really any question that has like a yes or no answer, they will just sign to me yes or no. And then for multiple choice questions, they will sign the letter to me, so A, B, C, or D. I also like to use some of the other whole brain teaching techniques such as Teach OK or mirrors. So again, if you're not familiar with whole brain teaching, the link for you is down in the description. I highly recommend you at least check it out. I'll just give a quick overview of each of them. So for Teach OK, the teacher is going to clap and say teach, and then the students will respond with clap, okay. Now basically the students have to mimic any of your hand motions that you do, any of your voices, or any of your claps. So for example, if I went teach, they would respond with okay. Then the students are going to turn their entire body towards the person next to them, and they're going to reteach the concept that you just taught to the class to their partner. Mirrors is basically where the teacher would say mirrors and put their hands up, and the students would repeat the same thing back. Then the students have to repeat any words the teacher says or any hand motions the teacher does. This is a great way to quickly review material, especially things like vocabulary. Hack number 2, teach in accents. So this is my absolute favorite thing to do as a teacher, especially because my accents and impressions are literally the worst thing in the world, but my students always think I'm really good at them. So anytime I notice my students are kind of drifting off or they're just not really into the lesson, I will instantly start teaching in a British accent or an Australian accent, and I'm not gonna lie, they kind of end up sounding the same, but my students will instantly be hooked. What I love about teaching is that your classroom is essentially a stage, and every single day when you walk in, you get to be an actor or an actress, and the best part is your students, which is your audience, are always going to think you did a great job. Obviously, I do use a lot of accents and impressions when I do my classroom transformations, but I also will just randomly use them during whole group instruction as well. Hack number 3, move around the room. So I know this sounds super basic, and I'm sure you guys have all heard this before, but I thought I would reiterate it because it is important. I guarantee you your students will be more engaged if you are moving around the room during your lesson. One of my favorite things to do is randomly stand up on a chair or a desk or a table or even the windowsill to get my students' attention. I guarantee you if you have a student who is like falling asleep and they're not paying attention and you get up and stand on a table, their eyes are instantly going to be glued to you and they're going to be paying attention. One of the places you see this done the most is Ron Clark Academy or RCA. Ironically, I did not learn about RCA or Ron Clark until the summer before my second year of teaching, but my first year of teaching, before I even knew about RCA, I would randomly get up on tables and chairs, and it was actually really funny. Probably within my first month of teaching, I remembered this one lesson, I had just stood up on a table to teach it, and all of a sudden my principal walked in, and obviously he didn't care, but it was just funny because all of my students started like, ooh, because they thought I was gonna get in trouble. This is one of the reasons I rarely ever wear heels to school, but part of being a teacher is doing whatever you have to do in order to get your students to pay attention. Hack number 4, change their seating. So this is another hack I will use if my students just aren't really into the lesson and I need something to wake them up. I will randomly tell them all to stand up and go find another seat in the classroom within the next 10 seconds. It is absolutely amazing to see how quickly they are engaged in the lesson and ready to learn just because they have gotten up, gotten into a new spot, and have a new perspective. I also will have them randomly flip their seat around so they're basically sitting backwards in their chair. I feel like sometimes as teachers we're so focused on our students sitting the right way that we forget it really doesn't matter sometimes. As long as they're seated safely and they're not gonna fall or slip, I have no problem with my students sitting backwards in their chairs. I just don't think it really matters, but it is gonna keep their attention a lot better during the lesson. I also will randomly have my students sit on top of their desks. Now currently I do have tables and they're not very sturdy at all. In fact, I have sat on one and had it topple over before, but in the past when I had student desks, I would have them sit on the desk and then put their feet on their chair just so they were more secure. And I love to do this if we were reading like a really boring story from the reading anthology that they just weren't into, or if we were reading Scholastic news articles on a Friday, they absolutely loved it. Hack number 5, classroom cheers. One of the best instructional hacks I can give you is just to make your classroom a fun place to learn, and one of the best ways to do that is with classroom cheers. I love classroom cheers because they literally only take a couple of seconds, but they are going to drastically increase student participation and just make your students feel a lot more successful. Now you can find literally tons of classroom cheers on Pinterest if you search them, but some of my favorites are pat the burger. So basically you say pat the burger and the students kind of go like this, and then they stick their hand out and you make like a sizzling noise, and then you ask them, is it done yet? And they'll say no, and they'll put it back down on the grill and continue to make the sizzling noise. You'll ask them again, is it done yet? And they say no, and then when you put it back down they go, it's well done, and they absolutely love it. Another one I really like is called cheese and grater. So you go, here's the cheese, here's the grater, we are great, great, great. And they always really like that one too. Plus, I also love make it rain because this one's super simple. I'll just say make it rain, and they take their palm and they start with one finger and they just tap it, and then I'll say 2 fingers and we go 3, 4, all the way up to their whole hand, and then they go back down for 3, 2, 1. So it just starts to get a little bit louder, and it does start to sound like it's raining in the room, which is really, really cool, and then it kind of goes back down so it gets quiet again. Now you do have to make sure you teach these to your students at the beginning of the year and then practice them frequently, that way your students don't forget. But I love to use these all the time in my classroom, especially during like whole group math. If we're solving a lot of problems, it makes my students want to participate, and it just makes them feel a lot better when they get the right answer. Hack number 6, use music. I'm a huge fan of using music in the classroom for almost everything. Music is a great way to get your students focused on their work, to help them transition between tasks, or even just to set the mood during a read aloud or a lesson. Obviously my students love Kids Bop, and I love it too. I will play it for them with Spotify on my phone. However, it does get distracting sometimes during independent work, so if they are working on something in small groups or by themselves, I like to put on classical music. And also on Spotify, if you search classical pop, there's a playlist and it has all kinds of pop songs that are done classically, and I love that because my students recognize the tune of the song, but the words aren't so distracting to them. I also really love to play like sound effects, especially during a read aloud or a lesson. So for example, whenever I read aloud The Great Kapok Tree, I always go on YouTube and I search rainforest sounds, and I'll just have that playing in the background. My students also love to have a video with like sound effects of a fire going, especially if they are silent reading. I also love to put on like rain sound effects or wave sound effects if my students are working on an art project. I also love to play Mission Impossible music, and if you go on YouTube and search it, you will instantly recognize it, I promise you. But I will put on that music and I will tell my students either to come to the carpet or line up like ninjas, so they have to do it really, really quietly. Now, there will always be those 1 or 2 kids who get super, super into it, and they'll be like rolling on the floor as they come up. I don't have a problem with it as long as they're not gonna injure themselves and they're not gonna injure someone next to them, and they do it safely. I don't have a problem with it. They're kids, they need to have fun. Hack number 7, praise phrases. This hack is kind of similar to the classroom cheers hack, just in the sense that building a positive learning environment in your classroom is going to drastically increase student engagement and student participation, and another great way to do that is with praise phrases. So a praise phrase is just a way to praise or compliment a student. I feel like there are so many times that we get stuck saying the same things over and over and over, like great job or you're so smart. So praise phrases just really focus on giving specific feedback to your students so that they know exactly what they did really well. I have just found that using specific praise phrases really helps with my students' confidence, so here are some of my favorites. I'm so proud of you for working so hard. That took a lot of practice, and I'm so glad you stuck with it. You are such a great friend to your classmates. They are so lucky to have a kind friend like you. You have such a positive attitude about learning, and seeing you learn brightens my day. I love how you took ownership of your own problem. I'm so proud you made that good choice. You can find tons of praise phrases out there. You can find really, really creative ones online, but basically just make sure you're giving your students specific feedback so they know what they did really well or what they need to improve on. Hack number 8, graffiti walls. So this one's a little bit more content related, but I wanted to share it with you guys because you can use it so many different ways and it requires literally no prep. So a graffiti wall is basically a place for students to share their ideas or their thinking or their learning or their questions, and it's a great way for students to basically hear other students' ideas. One way to do this is with butcher paper. That's just a paper that's used in the background of bulletin boards, but it basically becomes like a huge anchor chart, and your students are able to write their thinking right on there with a marker. You also can project a question or a topic on the whiteboard and have your students either write on the whiteboard with dry erase markers or give them a sticky note to record their thinking and then put it on the board. You can use this in so many ways. So you can use this almost as like a warm-up to a lesson where you're activating their prior knowledge and figuring out what they already know about a topic, or you can use it at the end of a lesson to figure out what they learned or what questions they have. You can use a graffiti wall as basically like an exit ticket, or even use it as an opportunity for them to reflect on a topic. I use graffiti walls all the time because they're super, super simple. They require no prep, but you can use them for any subject. Hack number 9, brain sprinkles. Okay, so I'm including this in here because it is something I've done since my first year of teaching, and my students always, always, always love it. So unfortunately, there are a lot of times where our students have to take tests, and for them, that can cause a lot of anxiety or a lot of negative feelings. So that's where brain sprinkles come in. Basically, I got this jar from Dollar Tree. I just filled it with silver glitter, and I sprinkle it over top of their heads before they take a test. Now, obviously, I do not want a huge pile of glitter to come out on their heads when I sprinkle it. Their parents would probably kill me. So all I did was stick a piece of tape over top of this little opening, and that way only a couple of pieces of glitter fall out each time. Now, obviously, I do not force this on my students. If I have a student who does not want them, that's totally okay. It is their choice. However, most of the time, my students beg me for them, and if I forget to give them out before a test, I will have a student remind me. I go around, I give it to them, and it's just a great way to build their confidence before a test. Obviously, it's a gimmick, but it is something that my students buy into, and it's a great way to give them something to look forward to when they are testing. Hack number 10, use student names. I did save this one for last because there's not really a whole lot to it, but I did think it was worth throwing in there. A super easy way to engage your students, especially in math, is to use their names in the problems. Kids will automatically be a lot more interested in the problem if they see their name or one of their friends' names. In the years past, when I would actually make my students' homework, I always included their names in the problems, and they absolutely loved it. You also can use student names if you're teaching vocabulary and you're using the words in a sentence. Throw a student name in there, and I promise you they will be able to connect to it a lot better. So those are my 10 easy to use instructional hacks. Hopefully it did give you some new ideas, and if it did, please give this video a thumbs up so that it can reach more teachers. Now, even though I am leaving for my trip next weekend, I do still plan to have my classroom vlog from this next week go live on Saturday morning just as usual, barring any technical difficulties. Fingers crossed there aren't any. And on Sunday, I will have a video going up all about how I prepared for my substitute. Make sure you go and enter my 50th video giveaway, which is 2 videos back, or you can use the bit.ly link down here, because I am giving away a $50 TPT gift card, and the giveaway is running through this Thursday, April the 20th. As always, I wanted to thank you all so much for watching. I love you all so much, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of this video and for supporting my YouTube channel. If you want to check out any of my older videos, you can use the 2 links right down here. If you want to subscribe to me so you don't miss any future videos, you can use the link right up here. In the description box, you will find links to all of my social media sites, my Teachers Pay Teachers store, and my Amazon store, and I will catch you guys in the next one.